This is Matt Hurt at Obsessive Viewer on Twitter.
This is Tiny at Obsessive Tiny on Twitter.
And this is ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show, each episode. You can find back episodes at ovpodcast.com, find the blog at obsessiveviewer.com, and you can also subscribe to the subreddit at r/obsessiveviewer. And if you want to help support the podcast, please go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, or you can simply leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. It helps us out a ton and helps people discover the podcast more. With more listeners, it gives us more listener reviews, give us higher ratings in the search results. And obviously, movie and TV podcasts are very much a competitive category. So if you like what you hear, please go to iTunes and leave a review. It will help us out a ton. So Tiny, how's it going?
Really, really well.
Nice. That's good to hear.
A little sunburned.
Right. Memorial Day weekend has came and gone.
Yeah, 100th running of the Indy 500. Got roasted. Right. But it was awesome.
I was recording Anthology all day.
Nice.
So before we get started on this, today on the podcast we're going to be reviewing X-Men Apocalypse, and we're going to do our normal Potpourri section and a little bit of news and everything. But before we get to all of that, we have a little bit of housekeeping and some feedback to go over. So the only real piece of housekeeping we have is that here in a few weeks, June 17th to the 19th, we're going to be at Indy PopCon.
Yes, we are.
Yes, at the Indiana Convention Center. It's going to be our third time doing the convention, third time the convention has happened. And we're really excited about it. And if you're going to be there, then please come to the podcaster stage on Saturday, June 18th at 3 p.m. That's when we have our time to be on stage and talk to everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not going to make it on the 17th that Friday because I just started a new job, and I think it would be pretty bad if I just skipped out on one day of training on the 17th. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be there, but I will be there Saturday and Sunday for sure, and I'm really looking forward to it. Tiny, are you excited about having to stand at the booth by yourself on Friday?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm totally a loner, good at that, not... Yeah, it'll be fun.
Nice. I should also have... I'm hoping that we'll get some more stickers and everything, but we're going to have candy and we're going to have hopefully some flyers made up by then. I completely forgot about that until this moment. Yeah. But I'm going to have my own set of anthology business cards, so I'm excited for that.
You can't not have fun at PopCon.
Oh yeah.
So totally. I'm cool with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So more information for that is at indypopcon.com, and we really hope that you guys come by our booth. Our booth number is going to be 448, and seriously, it's like one of my favorite moments from last year's PopCon was when one of our listeners, Andy, came up and introduced himself to us, and like that was awesome because I love that we actually meet people that we talk to. That hear us talk.
Right, I hear you.
Yeah, so that was awesome. So Andy, if you're listening, I fully expect you to come up to PopCon
and record with us this time. I mean, I think we've asked him a couple times.
I think so because he came to Shocktober also.
Yeah, he's just a little shy.
Yeah, that's
nothing wrong with that.
Right. So after that announcement, we also have some feedback on last week's episode. Our longtime listener Yasmin tweeted me about OV169, which we talked about abandoned TV shows that we abandoned, and she said that she has been thinking about abandoning The West Wing for a while because she can't get past season 4. It's just too slow. And Tiny, having watched all of The West Wing, what words would you have for Yasmin?
I understand what she's getting at. That was a darker time for the show, not as well written. But hang tight because the last couple seasons really are some of the best of the whole series. Nice. Stick with it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. I stopped right after season 3, and I think I was on the premiere of season 4, and I just fell out of it.
Yeah, so. It's understandable.
Yeah. Okay, so then the last piece of housekeeping is that last week on the podcast, we picked out of the bag for me to watch a movie out of the bag. It was selected for me to watch The Normal Heart.
And how was that, man?
So I've been so busy.
Mark Ruffalo's great, right?
He's in it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know because I didn't see it. No, I apologize. I know that we announced it last week that we would talk about that. I would talk about it for Potpourri this week. I misjudged how much time I have because I started a new job this week, and like everything about that has been realizing that I no longer have a job where I can do anything I want during the entire shift. So I'm in an actual real job now, and I can't I spent the last 2 hours after I got home from work before this recording making the notes for this recording. So I'll get to it eventually. I apologize. That and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it just popped back up on Hulu and Amazon Prime, so I'll try to find time to watch both of those and report back. But
cool.
Yeah, so suffice it to say, I don't think we're going to be picking out of the bag that much anymore.
Yeah, that's understandable.
For the time being, but we'll get back to that eventually. And also, Mike was supposed to join us this week, but unfortunately, he has real life things to attend to.
Yeah.
So he said that he'll hopefully be back for another 2 episodes before going back on hiatus from the podcast here in the coming weeks. Because I mean his son is due in a month, so I can't fault him at all.
Yeah, he's trying to finish the yearbook right now.
Yeah,
and he's got school.
Right.
So.
Yep. So. All right. So anyway, having said all of that, we have a few pieces of news that we want to get through before we get to our X-Men Apocalypse review. We're already kind of running long with these opening sections, so I'm just going to kind of rapid fire go through all of these real quick. The first piece of news is that the Logan's Run remake, which has long been in development hell for several years, several different names have been attached to it. I think the closest it came to being made was Nicholas Winding Refn was attached to it with Ryan Gosling.
Yep.
But that fell apart when they dropped out. But anyway, so the news this week is that Logan's Run remake, they have a screenwriter for it. I'll just read from /film that Ryan Condal, the co-creator and showrunner of Colony, which I think is on USA, is writing the new script based on Simon Kinberg's treatment. Condal and Kinberg's approach to Logan's Run is inspired more by William F. Nolan's 1967 novel, more so than director Michael Anderson's 1976 adaptation, and the essence of the story is the same, set in an ageist society where citizens are executed by the time they reach a certain age. In the book, they're killed at 21. In the original film, death comes at the age of 30. So, Tiny, do you have any thoughts on this? Have you seen the original Logan's Run?
I have not. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know that this remake should have come out like twice by now.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I recently watched it for an episode of Anthology, which, shameless plug, is my solo side project podcast exploring science fiction anthology storytelling during television's first golden age, starting with The Twilight Zone. In episode 8 of Anthology, I covered, as a supplemental review for the episode, I covered Logan's Run, the 1976 movie. I thought it was okay. If you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts, check that out at anthologypod.com. and on iTunes and all that. But I think that this movie is ripe for a remake. It's definitely has a very distinct 70s dystopian future kind of aesthetic to it, and I think that if they adapted it into a more modern film, I think it could translate well without tarnishing the original. Maybe. Who knows?
Gotcha.
So the next piece of news is that Rogue One, a Star Wars story, is going to be going into reshoots. Reading again from /film, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, is undergoing 4 weeks of reshoots in June with director Gareth Edwards and most of the cast, because after the first screening, which was for Disney executives. By the way, I'm not reading this exactly. I'm paraphrasing a little bit here and there. Sorry.
It's all right.
Most of the cast, because after the first screening, which was for Disney executives, they thought that the film was, quote, tonally off with what a classic Star Wars movie should feel like. Reportedly, the tone of the Star Wars movie was more that of a traditional war drama, and the reshoots will attempt to, quote, lighten the mood, bring some levity into the story, and restore a sense of fun to the adventure. That's it for that. What do you make of this, Tiny? And does it affect your eagerness for the movie?
Actually, yeah, it does. I don't think it's a good thing. I'm always weary of when a group of producers get together and say this needs to change, especially in post like this. Like the movie's already shot and at least roughly edited together. I think they need to be more respectful of a director and a filmmaker's vision. And I think when you try to change something like the tone, it can just have such a negative effect on the overall feel of the movie. And, that's coming from a novice perspective, but that's just the feel I get with this is, producers need to executives need to kind of keep their hands off of the creative side. Not saying it always is a negative thing, but I don't know. It doesn't inspire confidence.
I agree, and it's a shame to say that, but I agree to an extent, I should say. I think that when you have a property that has this much writing on it, I mean, this is the first Star Wars prequel since, the abominations that were the Star Wars prequels. Right. So I think that maybe there's a little bit of hesitance with this particular one, but I don't know. I think that it's Disney's footing the bill, so I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Still have not seen the trailer for it, so I got nothing. So finally, for our last piece of news, and this will be really brief, and it'll segue somewhat cleanly into our main topic. Bryan Singer and Sam Mendes are both taking a break from X-Men and the Bond franchise, respectively. I'll talk about Mendes first. He basically was quoted during an appearance at the Hay Festival. I don't know what that is, but his quote is that directing Bond, is it 25?
25, yeah.
Yeah, Spectre. He said, quote, "It was an incredible adventure. I loved every second of it, but I think it's time for somebody else." And he went on to say that he hopes the next director comes from, quote, an unexpected direction. And he also said that while the Bond series moves forward without him, Mendes wants to work on something else altogether, saying, "I'm a storyteller, and at the end of the day, I want to make stories with new characters." I can respect that.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. And there's a rumor that Suzanne Bear, I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Me either.
Yeah. She might direct the next Bond, which some of her credits, I went through, I hadn't seen any of her movies that she's done, but her most recent credits are Serena from 2014, that Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper movie that was kind of released under the rug and wasn't that well received.
Right.
And also The Night Manager, which is a TV miniseries on AMC with Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie. I haven't seen it. I don't have any firm reference for it.
Yeah, me either, really.
Yeah. So that's what Sam Mendes is up to.
Yeah.
And finally, for the last piece of news, as said before, Bryan Singer is going to take a break from X-Men. And he said, quote, "I recently met Danny Boyle. He and I have known each other for many years, but never met." I don't know what that means. Quote, "He was prepping Steve Jobs at the time, and I was doing this," meaning Apocalypse. And he said, "Are you going to be doing X-Men movies forever?" And I didn't actually say no. And then he went on to say that the reality is, even though I'm very desperate to jump to something completely different, I've spent so many years in this universe, and I love this cast and the characters so much, I just don't see myself abandoning them forever. Perhaps as a consultant or a producer or even as a director, I could see myself returning in the future. Just right now, since this one is done, I'd like to do something really different. So I think he has his next project lined up as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, that'll be good.
Yeah. So, to read that headline after seeing Apocalypse and seeing the somewhat negative critical reception to Apocalypse, I kind of thought that maybe it was him just kind of cutting bait or abandoning ship.
Yeah.
But I don't know. His quotes seem okay or seem genuine.
Yeah, I fully respect when a creative person bows out of a given property, because I think there's something very noble about realizing when you've kind of had your time and you've put in your perspective on a given story or a property or whatever, and then you're like, it's just time for someone else to do it. So I respect both of these guys for doing that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So that rounds us out for news, and we're going to go ahead and go into our review of X-Men Apocalypse. Before we do that, though, really briefly, Tiny, what are your thoughts on the X-Men franchise and the most recent title in 2014, Days of Future Past?
It's really peaks and valleys. I think the first X-Men movie was one of the first big ones that really kicked off all these comic book movies. Was it like 1997 maybe?
No, it was 2000.
Was it 2000?
Yep.
Wow, I thought it was before that.
It came 8 years before the Marvel Cinematic Universe started.
Wow, okay. So. But, it was still up front there. And that movie, when you look at it compared to stuff now, it's pretty simple, and I think that simplicity is what appeals to people and what appealed to people back in 2000. And I feel like they got away from that a little bit. Understandably so. There's pressure from all different directions to make it bigger and grander than the last one. And I get that, but I think the X-Men franchise is ready for a little more simplicity, or just to be put on a shelf for half a decade or so, or even longer. But it was just peaks and valleys, I think, with the whole franchise. It would go up and it'd go down, and some of the peaks were fantastic and some of the valleys were deep.
Right.
But I'm the kind of fan of it where if an X-Men movie comes out, I'm going to go see it. And I'm probably going to like it at least a little bit.
Right.
Even X-Men Origins Wolverines, I don't defend that movie because it's indefensible.
Right.
But I still kind of enjoy that movie a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, I won't go so far as to say I like it, but I can watch it and enjoy parts of it.
Sure.
So, yeah.
How about Days of Future Past?
Days of Future Past, I think, is the highest peak. I'll save my review of Apocalypse for our discussion of it, but I don't think it quite reached the level it is Future Past. So, for me, that's the pinnacle of what we've gotten so far out of X-Men. I concur, except for the X-Men Origins Wolverine. I just think that that's completely unwatchable. Oh, okay. That's fair.
Yeah. As for... Basically, I wrote a big review series of the X-Men franchise on ObsessiveViewer.com a couple years ago in preparation for Days of Future Past. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes. But briefly, I'll just say that I grew up, I guess I was, 14, 15, loving the first two X-Men movies.
Okay.
And, those two movies were fantastic. X2 was my favorite superhero movie for a long time. And, then, we got The Last Stand, and then I think after that, was X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah.
And that, I didn't even bother watching it because I had such a sour taste in my mouth from The Last Stand. And then First Class came out, and that kind of rejuvenated my interest in the franchise. And then the Wolverine, I just didn't really give that much attention to, but Days of Future Past, I agree, was the highest point of the franchise for me. I thought that it was a beautiful way to meld together the two timelines of the franchise, from First Class and the original trilogy, and I just thought that it was really well done. It had its flaws. I thought that the ending, the climactic showdown, was a bit empty or not really that interesting, really.
Yeah.
And a little convoluted, but I thought that it was still a really enjoyable time, and it was really good for what it was, and it was really great at fixing the timeline. So, that brings us to X-Men Apocalypse. So, Tiny, what's your kind of brief overview of the movie? Spoiler free.
Spoiler free. Yeah, I had such low expectations going in from.
Really?
So many different people said, I heard from so many different sources that it just really isn't very good, and that weighed heavily on my expectations going in, and just seeing all the stuff about how the Power Rangers costume designers helped out. I was just like, oh, this is going to be bad. And I think that worked to my favor because I liked this quite a bit.
Nice.
I didn't love it. I don't know where in the franchise I would put the film, but probably in the middle somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I don't know what it was about it, but it was just fun for me. It held my attention the whole time. I think it had a straightforward story that was easy enough to follow. It even with the million characters who were in it and all the different storylines and everything, I think they balanced it out decently well. Some characters went a little undeveloped, but I don't know. I dug it, and I don't know how well I can defend it, but I think it was a good movie. I'd probably give it like almost a 7, maybe.
Oh,
like a high 6 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not a 6.5, not a 7. Right in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. As for my overview of X-Men Apocalypse, I went into it with, I'm still riding a little high off of Days of Future Past. I really enjoyed it, and I was really excited to have Singer back at the helm. By my count, he hadn't made a bad X-Men movie yet, because he did X-Men, X2, and Days of Future Past. X-Men doesn't really hold up that well. It's a little dated, but it's still, below the surface, it's still a strong movie. So I went into Apocalypse kind of hearing whispers that it wasn't that good, and I will say that I don't think it was a bad movie. I don't think it was terrible. I didn't come out of it ready to bash it or anything like that, but I just thought that it was just kind of okay. If I'm ranking it against the franchise, I think I'd put it a little bit below average or below the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. There were some elements of it that, for instance, I thought that we'll get more into this as we discuss it, but I felt like the motivations of the villain were just completely vague, uninteresting, and the overall plan and the execution of that plan was just, by that point, I was pretty much ready to get up and leave. And it took a long time to get into the actual story, and it seemed like they were trying to do... At one point, it seems like the movie was divided into 2 different movies and 2 different narratives that I didn't really care about reconciling in my brain. We'll talk more about that in spoilers, because I want to keep that... There are people who don't watch trailers, so I'll keep that kind of for spoilers. But there was just this really... Pacing is really the main problem for me in this movie, is that it just wasn't paced well. Having said that, I thought that it was okay overall as far as action, as far as comic book action movies go in the X-Men universe. It's no Deadpool, obviously. It's no X2. It's no Days of Future Past. It's no X-Men. But on the other hand, it's also not as bad as X-Men Origins or... I don't know where I'd rank it against this summer comic book movies right now, but I didn't come out of it angry like I did with Batman v Superman, and I didn't come out of it absolutely floored like Civil War. So that's my kind of roundabout, vague way of saying that I thought that this movie was okay. There are elements that worked pretty well, but other elements that just fell flat for me and didn't really do much for me in terms of keeping me captivated as an audience member. And we'll dive more into that. I think my rating would probably be 5 or maybe 5.5 out of 10.
Okay.
So, yeah. So we'll dig more into that then. For those who, for whatever reason, don't know, X-Men Apocalypse, the plot outline is with the emergence of the world's first mutant, Apocalypse, the X-Men must unite to defeat his extinction-level plan. So, Tiny, right off the bat, what did you think of some of the new characters? Like, we got a new introduction of Scott Summers, or Cyclops, and we got Jean Grey, and a new Nightcrawler, new Storm. There's Psylocke. There's, of course, Apocalypse. We'll talk about him separately. But there's all these new characters. What stood out to you of those characters, and what did you think of their reintroductions of some of them?
I thought Scott Summers was done really well. Cyclops, because I was always very unsatisfied with his character in the original trilogy. I mean, I used to think less of James Marsden because I thought he was a terrible actor. But I don't think it was him. I just don't think the character was written all that well. I never really connected with him very much in the original trilogy. But right off the bat, I think they just gave him a certain attitude, and he just stuck out so much more. He had so much more personality than the Scott Summers we had in the original trilogy, played by James Marsden. So he was a standout as far as I'm concerned. The low points for me were Angel and Psylocke. I mean, they barely had lines, let alone character development. I mean, that's kind of typical of main villain's henchmen to be a little undeveloped, but they could have done a lot more with both of those characters. Especially Angel with the whole tortured angle, and Psylocke with the whole really hot Olivia Munn.
Sure.
And if they would have added that stuff in, it could have felt even more bloated. So maybe that was a creative choice. But and as far as the other character, like Storm, not much there either.
Right.
I think the actress was really exciting. She had the look going. I think she looked awesome.
Oh, totally.
She looked great.
Oh yeah. Did your theater show the like pre thing with her talking to the audience?
Yeah.
When I came out of the movie, all I thought was like, for the listeners, basically before the movie actually started, the actress who plays Storm, who I don't have the name readily available, it's Alexandra something, I think, but there was like this like kind of PSA thing saying like, hey, thanks for coming to see our movie. A lot of people worked really hard on this movie, and we're really excited for you to see it. Just basic PR stuff like that. That's before the movie starts, and I mean, by the end of the movie, it seemed like she had more words to say in that thing than she did in the entire movie, and that was a problem for me.
I agree.
Like you said with the four horsemen characters, even it like Psylocke, like the internet is kind of predisposed to like kind of rag on Olivia Munn. Like, I feel like she doesn't get a fair chance to showcase her acting abilities. I haven't really seen her. She hasn't blown me away in anything, really.
Right.
But I kind of feel like there's this predisposition to kind of dislike what she does with her acting talent, which, I mean, I don't care one way or another. I didn't follow her when she was on Attack of the Show or anything like that. So I don't care one way or another. But going into, like, I hope that she gives a good performance and everything. She had nothing to work with here.
Nothing.
Like, at all. And I came away thinking, like, okay, well, I enjoyed Psylocke in the movie because I thought that she handled her action scenes particularly well. But, I mean, I did not care about the character at all because they didn't give her anything.
Right. Agreed. I was a little disappointed with the Nightcrawler. I think he was funny. He had some good comic relief.
Sure.
I appreciated that, but his character in like the comics and even some of the earlier movies, he is such a deep character. There's he's a very tortured person, which is a common thread throughout the X-Men, but he's a fan favorite for a lot of the fans of the comics and stuff. And I think they could have tapped into some more of that depth. And they chose not to. It's more of a choice than anything they made, and I can't, if they had gone that direction, I don't know if it would have dragged the movie down a little bit, but
sure,
I would have liked to seen a little more. And then the big one that stuck out was Sophie Turner, as Jean Grey. I thought she did a really good job.
I think so too.
I was again just a tiny bit disappointed with Famke Janssen. Was that who played her in?
Yeah, in the original
Famke Janssen,
the original trilogy.
I just thought she was a little flat as that character.
Yeah.
In the original trilogy. I don't think she's an amazing actress, anyways.
Those first three movies really were contingent on the kind of love-struck angle of Wolverine and Jean Grey and
the triangle.
Movies. Yeah, and when I went back and watched it a couple years ago, I just thought I'm not really that invested in this whole thing. So maybe part of that was Famke Janssen.
She's more than that character is more than just the peak of a love triangle, if you will.
Right.
She's more than that, and I'm glad they did that in this movie. They showcased that.
Right. So, Scott Summers, Cyclops. You mentioned that you liked what they did here because James Marsden was kind of wasted in those first three movies.
Yeah.
And I agree. However, it kind of seemed like it just seemed like the movie didn't really know what it wanted to do with any of the characters, really.
Yeah.
Particularly Scott Summers, the movie just about one of the opening scenes is him discovering his powers, which it's a cool thing because you kind of always wonder how does someone who can open their eyes without causing destruction, how does the genesis of their powers happen? And it was done well, but by the end of the movie, I'm like, why did they show that? Like, what storytelling purpose was that? And it kind of felt like, knowing that Cyclops is like one of the leaders of the X-Men, or one of the leaders of the team, it kind of felt like this introduction almost belonged in like the first movie of like basically the First Class equivalent of this second trilogy, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and it just seemed like they were setting up for more movies without having those more movies planned out or intended to do any of that.
Right.
It just seemed like, okay, well, we'll go ahead and introduce Cyclops into this world, which, I mean, that's fine. He hadn't been in First Class or Days of Future Past, and I don't think he was in either timeline in that one. But no, this is his first of the young cast, and like, that's fine. But it's just, it didn't serve any real purpose, and it set up the Jean Grey and Cyclops relationship a little bit, and I like that they did that with at least a hint of subtlety. But it kind of felt like that origin scene didn't really belong in the movie, and I would have been fine with it being omitted. Part of me also thinks maybe that's Bryan Singer making up for kind of just dragging that character through the mud in the first three movies.
Yeah, could be.
So that could be the point of that, but I don't know.
Yeah, he could have not been in the movie, and you pretty much would have had the same movie.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
No, I mean, he would have been in he served purpose in the actual movie.
Yeah.
But that origin, though.
The origin, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah, and then Nightcrawler, I dug quite a bit.
Yeah.
I agree with what you said, because this is actually his first, I don't know if you realize this actually, do you know that this is his first X-Men movie since X2?
Oh, wow,
That's the only X-Men movie he's been in.
Jeez.
And I remember when I went back and rewatched the whole franchise for that review series, I just got to X2 and I was like, I can't believe this is the last I'm going to see of Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Because, like, when I was a kid, I watched the animated series, and I loved Nightcrawler.
I was just about to mention that.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
He was a fully realized character on that show, and he was, again, a fan favorite. He was one of mine. He was fully realized in that series, and the movies never found that version of Nightcrawler,
right.
And it's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, Nightcrawler was really done well in this movie. Yeah, I enjoyed what they did with him. Some of the comedy, though, overall, just fell kind of flat for me.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a little forced. Like, some of the stuff with, and this is kind of transition a little bit into the plot, but some of the stuff with Xavier, and particularly some of his dialogue about and to Moira McTaggart, played by Rose Byrne, just felt really awkward, but in the wrong kind of awkward. Like,
yeah,
it just seemed like it was I didn't buy it.
It was delivered well, but the problem was it felt like it was out of context, really.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a weird way to put it. But it kind of felt a little unnatural for the character of Charles Xavier as well. But at the same time, I kind of enjoyed his vulnerability in those moments. So it was give and take, but yeah, the comic relief was forced. You said the word forced. That's a good word for it. It's like, well, we need to throw in some jokes here, so let's do this. Some of it landed with me, especially some of the stuff from Nightcrawler was good. And I have a man crush on James McAvoy, so
sure.
Some of that goofy stuff did land with me, but that's bias more than anything, I think. So
yeah, and I liked his performance, though, overall. Like, I liked. I felt like the script didn't really give him much to do.
Yeah, but he did a lot with what he had.
He did, yeah. Oh, yeah. And just some of the lines just felt just awkward and out of place. In addition to that, in that relationship, and also just throughout, like, this is kind of a spoiler. Like, in the climactic battle, there's like scenes where people say things, and it's like it made me cringe just a little bit, just a tad, and it kind of bugged me. But it didn't really derail the movie overall for me. What did derail the movie for me a little bit was Apocalypse. We're introduced to his character way back in Egypt, and that's a compelling introduction. I was along for the ride with how they introduced him, how they explained his basic his stasis and why he lay dormant. I appreciated that because it showed why and how he's been resting this whole time. Like, I thought that was fine. But once he awakens, it just seems like he's roaming around. He's assembling his no Marvel property pun intended. He's assembling his team of of mutants that he's gathering his 4 horsemen, and it's like about halfway through the movie, I'm like, okay, just get on with it. Just do your thing. And then the plot just goes into takes different detours, and it just felt like I didn't really get the sense that Apocalypse, like, I get that he was doing things. I didn't really get the reason why. I didn't even get a good sense of what exactly his powers were. And I didn't even get the sense that, he was really convincing these people to follow him. Like, I just thought that it was a little hollow for me. I thought that it would have been more intriguing if he had just a more powerful grasp on the 4 horsemen and something. I wish that there was something more there.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of I felt differently about it. I don't know if I'd say I disagree, but I felt differently about it. I like the way that he operated through manipulation. Mm-hmm. He found flaws in people and exploited them in order to get them to his side. It wasn't so much about the 4 horsemen that he collected believing in his cause. It was more about exploiting what was wrong with them and trying to use that to his advantage. And so I found that intriguing. And for me, the best thing about Apocalypse that I really liked was his interaction with some of the mutants, given how he affected their powers. Because he's clearly an evil person who just craves power and wants to rule the universe,
right?
And destroy anyone who's not strong enough to survive in his world. But I think there's a really interesting channel throughout his story where he kind of brings out, he allows people to realize the widest and most powerful realization of their powers. For example, what Magneto does, the scene at Auschwitz, which I thought was awesome, and just what he does in the climax and everything, and then everything he does with Charles Xavier. I thought that was, he kind of has a point throughout the movie. He's like, you're not tapping into the full potential of your powers. You need to, don't see yourself as like a steward of the powers, see yourself as a master of them, and like you should use these to do good things or do important, incredible things. And I thought that was an interesting dynamic because he has a point. Like, I don't think if he never came along, who knows if Magneto and Professor Xavier would have ever understood the full breadth of their powers. And it bites him in the ass in the end.
Right.
But it was, I don't know, I enjoyed that. And I don't know, I enjoyed it.
I can understand that, but I just could not connect to it the way that you did, because it just felt more like, particularly like with Angel. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, let's meet Angel. Oh, let me give you some new wings, and that's suddenly he's part of the team, and it just seemed like he's recruiting, like the 4 horsemen are basically his minions to wreak havoc and destruction on the entire planet, and cleanse the entire. Like, he says that he needs to cleanse humans off the planet, and it's like, I mean, if my arm's broken and some guy is like, here, I'm going to fix your arm instantly and give you a new arm, a bionic arm that's really powerful, now go kill a bunch of people. I'd be like, oh, I don't know about this guy.
Yeah.
And that's a weak analogy, but it somewhat fits in my perception of how the movie told its story. And there are some cases, like with Magneto, which I think we'll talk a little bit about Magneto's arc, probably more in spoilers than anything. But there's some that it's like kind of do, like Magneto is a very very mercurial character who is, he switches sides often, so it's it's kind of expected he would be kind of an evil, he would be attracted to evil. But I mean, Storm is just this kid in, I think, Egypt that has some powers that and she idolizes Mystique, which we can talk about Mystique also in a bit, but she just, like, she sees her as a hero. And I think that maybe the through line of the Horsemen and what they, well, I don't know. So maybe the through line is that they are mutants and that they are, maybe the movie was trying to communicate that the mutants are sought after, not sought after, but they're looked down upon by humans and everything, which is a clear running thread throughout the entire franchise. But, like, I don't know, when Singer started the franchise with the first two X-Men, he put such an emphasis on the allegory of the mutants versus humans thing as being like a metaphor for hate, and particularly the persecution of the homosexuals and social situations like that. And that was such a clear narrative through line throughout all of Singer's movies. In here, I didn't get any of that, like, at all. And it just seemed like it was just, they were hunting for Magneto because he was on TV 10 years before, and that's about the extent of the human versus mutant debate, which, I mean, granted, we're several movies into this franchise, so maybe they don't really need to do that or spell it out or anything like that, but it still felt it just felt like there was no motivation for me aside from Apocalypse just, sweet talking the mutants into joining him. I just thought that it was just a little hollow for me.
Yeah, that's fair. And throughout what you said about the whole humans versus mutant thing is, at the very least, it was a subplot throughout the other films, and here it was just kind of hinted at a little bit. Right. And I get that, but I think we're just at this point in the franchise, I just kind of feel like we're past that a little bit, and it has to always be present because it's always a conflict. But this was just so much. This was so much different. It was just about the conflict amongst the mutants. It was about how they were going to choose to exist in the world and how they were going to. They had to pick a side in this, and I don't know. I think there should have been a little bit more about how there's a point where Apocalypse kind of says, anyone who survives this will be worthy of living in the new world, sort of, and in a way that's basically him saying the mutants are going to survive this, and that's about it. Right. So we're going to rule the world and then eventually the universe and stuff like that. So there's a bit of supremacy and, ego involved in that. And so that's a bit of a reference to that whole conflict and that idea, but yeah, it was pretty unrealized. And it was. And not, just not very, just not covered all that well. So I understand your qualms with that. It just didn't bother me that much. Yeah, like, I'd have to see it again, but it just seems like that motivation or that kind of selling point for the mutants to join Apocalypse, like, sure, that's what he intended and everything, but, like, seeing that contrasted with Storm, like, having a poster of Mystique on her wall because she idolizes her because she saved, I think the perspective that she had of Mystique was that she saved the president and a bunch of people, and she's like, I want to live up to that expectation and everything. And then suddenly Apocalypse is like, oh, I need to cleanse the planet, and she's like, oh, I'm game for that, let's do it. It just seemed
it seemed kind of, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. And I feel like part of that is that Apocalypse wasn't, his character as a whole wasn't as fully realized as I would have liked him to be.
Yeah.
Still, like, Marvel Studios still have weaker villains.
True.
Than Apocalypse by my count in some of their worst moments. But I still just wish that there was something. And I'll save this for spoilers, but there's a clear, like, subplot that I feel like could have been just completely just gutted and omitted from the movie overall, and it would have given them far more screen time to develop Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen and all that.
Yeah.
But we'll save that for spoilers.
Okay.
So Magneto, I don't know how much we want to talk about this in the spoiler-less segment, but what did you think of where he was at the beginning of the movie? And because he's kind of laying low after the events of Days of Future Past, and he's built his own little life. How did you feel about that characterization?
That I enjoyed, seeing him kind of as a simple person, as a more, he's a larger than life character, and to see him just being a common man was an interesting exercise, I think. So I really don't have an issue with that, but I feel like his eventual arc is it's really just a derivation of almost all of his arcs throughout the series anyways. He's a flip-flopper. He's the Mitt Romney of the X-Men universe. So yeah, I can't criticize it too much because I did like it. Again, the two men in the world I have the biggest man crush on are James McAvoy and
Michael Fassbender.
Yeah. So, bit of bias here, but I think he's I really appreciate his version of Magneto, and I've just enjoyed it so much over these three movies that I don't want to criticize it that much because I've just had so much fun with it.
That's fair.
Yeah,
and we'll talk more in depth about his arc in the movie in spoilers. But kind of round out the spoiler-free segment of this review, Mystique. Now, I understand fans of the comics are, like, Mystique isn't a big character in the comics, and it seems like the movies are making her a main point of it strictly because Jennifer Lawrence is really it right now, and she brings in money. And I think in Days of Future Past, I didn't have a problem with that. I thought that she did fine, and it suited the story of that universe very well. Here, it stuck out so bad for me.
Yeah.
Like, I kept thinking, like, oh, okay, well, they just want Jennifer Lawrence on screen so that Jennifer Lawrence fans will pay money to see the movie. And it just felt really disingenuous to the story being told this time around. And it was just kind of like, she's like this military leader of the X-Men, and she's rallying the troops and everything. And I'm like, okay, she's Blue Katniss Everdeen. Like, she's doing the same kind of thing. And I don't know. I thought that was just kind of a big misstep. And I think they put too much faith in her celebrity and, her, it factor, basically, to carry the movie. And I don't think that character really should carry the movie that much. Yeah, it stuck out to me, and I didn't really like it that much.
I agree with that 100%.
Nice.
I felt the same way. Her character was like out of place in this movie, and it's like, what do we do with her? She'll be the rallier. Yeah, right. Okay. It's like, she was just out of place. Yeah. And this felt like what, to your point, where people have pointed out that it seems kind of exploitative of her celebrity to have her featured so prominently throughout these two movies, and now the third. I feel like the first two, it wasn't a problem because she was interesting and she added a lot to the plot, and Jennifer Lawrence is a good actress despite the fact that she's so hugely popular. But in this movie, that exploitation was at its highest point, I think.
Right.
Because they didn't even try to do very much with their character.
Yeah, and I think that's why I liked her in Days of Future Past, is because her character is kind of the linchpin of the entire plot. Mm-hmm. And she's the reason why Wolverine has to go back in time and everything. It's different from the comics, but I can accept that because I've never read the comics and I don't have that bias going into it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fine. And her relationship with Magneto and Professor Xavier, like that dynamic worked really well in Days of Future Past. Here, it just felt so hollow and empty to me. It just felt like I don't know. It like I said, it just felt empty to me. And also there was so much of her as human Jennifer Lawrence that I have to assume that it was like in her like she renegotiated her contract where she wouldn't be in the makeup for as long. And
even when she was in the makeup, she was wearing clothes. Like she wasn't really naked very much, or the equivalents of naked. Right. I noticed that too.
Yeah, and it was just, I don't know. It didn't impair the movie. It impaired the movie somewhat to me, but it just felt. Well, it just didn't fit. It just didn't fit for me.
I agree.
And we would be remiss if we didn't bring up Quicksilver also.
Oh, yeah.
So Days of Future Past introduced Quicksilver to the mix in a very highly respected and celebrated sequence. And they kind of doubled down on that, and they did they did an even bigger set piece for him in this movie. What did you think of Quicksilver and his inclusion in this movie?
They could make a whole Quicksilver movie of just those kind of sequences, and I'd be all over it. I'm not to say that I don't think that would ever get old, but it's just too fun to leave out. Yeah. It's just too fun and too well done. It's just like that's the best representation of a character like that, who's just faster than anything. It's just so impressive. And it also added some comedic relief that I think was needed and was actually done well. And thankfully in this movie they gave him a lot more development, and they turned him into a real character. He wasn't there. Totally. He wasn't just there for all flair. He actually had a little bit of depth and some development that I really appreciated. I think he tied in well with the plot. He wasn't just kind of there for those reasons. For superficial reasons. He was there for the plot, and I appreciated that. And I can't even remember the actor's name, but he's just great. Evan Peters, yeah. He's great with the whole smirky, quirky attitude, but then he totally got serious and was like a real character in this, and he did well. I agree. I just wish that there was more payoff to his arc. Yeah, that's true. I'll agree with that. Yeah, I was waiting for a certain big moment, but it just never came, and it was a downer for me. As for the big set piece that they had with him, I liked the Days of Future Past sequence better, because it just felt like this one. I mean, I like what they did, and I liked how they did it. It just seemed like there was just a little too much. Like they cranked it up to 11 a little too much, and. I kind of think that it was a little bit overdone, because I think that style and that flair and that, because it's basically the same thing. It's just, showing his powers while having a time appropriate, I guess, pop song play. Yeah. That's tongue in cheek and seeing all that. Like that's fine and that's great in small doses, but this was so much bigger than Days of Future Past, and by the end of it I was like, that was really cool and I love what they did. I just saw it in a more novel way 2 years ago. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't dislike him. I think Evan Peters is phenomenal as Quicksilver, and I agree. You could have a whole movie with him. It would be really cool to see him team up with Deadpool, actually. Oh, that'd be fantastic. That'd be really cool. Yeah. But then again, like I said, his arc didn't really, wasn't as satisfying to me at the end because it didn't really pay off for me. Yeah. What did you think of the visual effects? They were fine. I mean, nothing stood out amazingly well. I really appreciated the detail of Magneto's basically tapping into the gravity of the Earth. That I thought that was really cool. It was almost like a meat grinder
Yeah.
he turned gravity into a meat grinder. That was pretty awesome. I appreciated that. I don't know. Nothing really stuck out as like, it's amazing how they did that. I think the slow motion stuff with Quicksilver is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think it was done a little better in the last movie.
Right.
It was fine. I don't really focus on special effects anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, but some of the special effects in the end sequence, maybe it was more the setting than anything. It just felt a little like they could have spent a little bit more time on it. It kind of felt more like they were playing against a blue screen or whatever.
Okay.
And it just, I don't know, I don't have the knowledge to really articulate what I had a problem with in that respect, but it just, something about it took me out of the movie just a little bit, that it just felt a little off, like they were playing in a playground. Maybe it's because they were in that location, and that location is just kind of it was like they were playing in a big sandbox, basically.
Okay.
Like, there was no there was nothing really to distinguish where they were or what they were doing.
Okay.
That much. There wasn't anything unique or anything really to set it apart from any other real, as opposed to any other location.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we go into spoilers, though, I basically posted a post on our Facebook page, which is at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer. Go ahead and go like that page for us, because I really like when I get the notification say that people like our page. So I posted a question just asking everyone what they thought, and I got quite a few responses, so I'm just going to go ahead and read them. Okay, so here we go. Alex, our friend Alex, who is also a contributor on ObsessiveBookNerd.com, she said that X-Men Apocalypse definitely had its moments, but she liked First Class better, and the Quicksilver parts were the best. And then on the Facebook page, her fiance Justin actually responded with, casting and acting were both solid, but I felt like the plot advanced far too rapidly and haphazardly, in my opinion. With the vast number of characters and rich personal history of X-Men, there's only so much you can shove into 2 to 3 hours of screen time. I think it would make for a great HBO series with the right budget, but I know that's wishful thinking, and I totally agree with that. I think that with the amount of characters, I think that it would be a great TV series.
Totally.
And then Brandon Cruz from, he's a fellow Twilight Zone podcaster, from the Submitted for Your Approval podcast, which I'm actually going to be a guest on here in like a month or two, I think.
Cool.
I think at the end of July is what he said. Anyway, he said that he's not a fan of X-Men Apocalypse, to be honest. There's a bunch wrong with this movie. It's hard to pinpoint what the underlying issue is, but there is an issue. To me, in a few years, I don't think this movie will be looked back on fondly. And yeah. And then also Jeff Palermo from Sci-Fi On Screen podcast wrote, I didn't mind it. Was a decent addition to my bucket of popcorn. I liked it more than I did Days of Future Past. So you can,
interesting.
Yeah. So you can check out his podcast, Sci-Fi On Screen. And finally, friend of the show, Mike, who we met at PopCon. He's at Gray Matter Splat on Twitter. And also, it's worth mentioning that in the Indie PopCon Facebook group, there was a post where one of the organizers posted saying, like, what podcast do you listen to? And he mentioned The Obsessive Viewer in his comment.
I remember that. That was nice of him.
Yeah, that was awesome. So anyway, he said that X-Men Apocalypse was okay. I never really felt like there were any actual stakes. And in Oscar Isaac's defense, Apocalypse has honestly always been kind of bland with vague motivations. And when I referenced the plot line that I felt could be completely cut out of the movie and replaced with more development for Apocalypse, he said, I got the feeling that sequence was written in when Jackman agreed to make an appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And he said they knew it would bring people to the theater to show that Wolverine was in the trailer. So
right.
Okay, so that's it for our spoiler-free discussion, and we're going to have a brief spoiler section. So we'll have music playing or the trailer playing. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but just so you know, at the end of this, we're going to start spoiling X-Men Apocalypse. So be warned. If you want to go ahead and skip to the Potpourri section, you can check the show notes for the correct timestamp, or you can go to obsessiveviewer.com/OV170 for the show notes and timestamps and all that stuff.
The world needs the X-Men.
You're gonna join them, aren't you?
You wanted me to get out of the house more, right?
It's all of us against a god.
Let's go to war. Forget everything you think you know. You're not students anymore. You're X-Men.
So, all right, spoilers on. Spoilers on for X-Men Apocalypse. So, Tiny, Alex Summers,
Yeah.
Havoc in the movie. I felt like his death, the emotional impact of his death on Scott Summers, Cyclops, I felt like that just wasn't earned at all for me.
Yeah, it was very empty.
Yeah.
He just wasn't this is a mean thing to say, he just wasn't an interesting enough character.
He wasn't.
In the first couple movies of this trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
He really was not interesting. I mean, and he didn't, they never developed him all that much, which is kind of a downfall, if you will, of the first couple movies. But I agree. I just really didn't feel it that much.
Yeah, I didn't, and it's like, it's just the contrast of the reveal of his death is like, Quicksilver's going through and doing his Quicksilver thing, and it's awesome, and it's enjoyable, it's crowd pleasing, it's fun, and then suddenly it's like, I think I got everyone. And then Cyclops is like, my brother was in, I think it was Cyclops that said it, but he's like, my brother, or someone said...
It was Hank.
Okay, it was Hank. It was like, Alex was right by the blast, and it's like, and then that's it. Like, that's it. That's all we get of it. Like, I wish that there was more of an impact on it rather than just kind of move past it, I guess.
Yeah, it was clumsy.
Mm-hmm.
It was clumsy.
Yeah. So, immediately after the destruction of the School for the Gifted, Stryker shows up in a helicopter, takes some mutants, and then there's this long dragged out sequence at the Weapon X facilities, and it just felt like, that's what I'm talking about when I say that could have been cut out from the movie entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only purpose it served was in being sort of a cohesive event for all those characters to come together.
Sure.
But again, it was fluff.
Mm-hmm.
It was fluff, and it was like, I don't know if I'd say fan service, or it was more...
Oh, definitely.
It was exploitative.
Yeah.
Because it was like, well, Hugh Jackman's willing to show up and do this, so let's use that.
Right.
And that's why they did it.
Yeah, and it just felt... It felt so disconnected from the rest of the movie, so disconnected from what Apocalypse is doing, and it took away valuable screen time that could have been spent setting up Apocalypse and really developing his character. Mm-hmm. Granted, I think that his character, like a friend of the show, Mike, at Grey Matter Splat said, he's not very, he's not a very deep character, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the adaptation, they could have made him deep. They could have given him more depth.
Oh yeah,
with that screen time, and I felt like that was just such a kind of a not betrayal, but kind of just a disservice to us as audience members that we get this completely hollow villain and vague motivations and vague plans just because Hugh Jackman felt up to having a cameo in the movie.
Right.
It was just really, it bothered me. And to your credit and to your point, yes, it did bring the characters together, and it did, it put them together in a way that satisfied that arc, I guess, the arc of the characters of the students, basically, but just not enough for me.
It wasn't pointless, but it wasn't the best use of their time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish that they hadn't shown the Wolverine cameo, like teased it in the trailer.
Yeah, that was stupid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because, when they kind of showed, they heard grunting behind the door and everything, I felt like, oh man, okay, well I know that Wolverine's here because I've seen in the trailer, Cyclops say, oh, we had help, and I saw the claws and everything in the trailer, but it's wasted because this surprise is wasted. Granted, I mean, they're at the Weapon X facility. We know that he's there from the last movie. Okay, yeah, it's a given that he's going to be there. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It just felt, I don't know. The action in it was very PG-13, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was still fun because, I mean, my God, seeing Hugh Jackman do his Wolverine thing is so cool.
He's just the best man for the job.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little bit of friction on the PG-13-ness of it. I thought it was pretty violent.
There were violent moments, sure.
Yeah, and Wolverine's a super violent character. Mm-hmm. He's just raw carnage. That's just what he is in the comics and even the animated series. He was intimidating and scary. And so you can't pull your punches in those scenes, and I think they did a pretty good job. I mean, there's blood splatters, and I mean, the sound effects were effective. I wanted to give them the filmmakers credit in that regard. I feel like the violence was amped up a little bit, and I appreciated that. That's just my opinion.
Sure, I think that my issues with it is more that it felt a lot like a Hugh Jackman cameo in that it was like, okay, guys, I'm going to be on set for this amount of time. Let's not rehearse this big choreographed thing. Yeah. Let's just, cut around it, show some blood splatter, and then I'll be on my way to do my thing.
That's true.
So I think that's where it was. Like, I mean, granted, I'll have to go back and revisit, the movies and everything, but honestly, the assault on the school in X2, I don't know if we'll ever get a Wolverine sequence that's as satisfying as that.
Yeah.
Because that was just insane.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of the Wolverine cameo, what did you think of teen Jean Grey and him, and how she said that she gave him a piece of his memory or something?
I thought it was kind of a nice moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't bother me. And it's just been so long since I've seen the original trilogy too, the original X-Men trilogy. I don't remember a lot from that, to be honest.
Sure.
It wasn't my favorite part of that franchise or that trilogy. So it didn't necessarily mean a lot to me, or it didn't seem hollow to me. I enjoyed it.
Right, yeah. I enjoyed it too. However, just seeing those characters together at those stages of their lives, because Jean Grey is super young.
Yeah.
And knowing that she's going to have this romantic yearning for him in the future. Granted, he's kind of ageless and he's immortal or whatever. But seeing them at that point, like, it just felt a little uncomfortable to me, just as an audience member. But that's my own thing, probably. I don't know. I didn't
get that sense from it. It was intimate, but it wasn't romantic.
Right? Yeah.
I mean,
there was no romance there because it wasn't that. But it just, I don't know. It just felt, I don't know. I just had some residual thoughts about, the franchise as a whole, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
If I'm alone in this, or if someone else had that feeling too, let me know. If you can articulate it better, you can always email us or Facebook us or whatever.
Okay.
So let's see. We already covered that. Let's talk a little bit about Magneto and his Magneto the Family Guy.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. I thought that it was fine. I think that I don't really have much thoughts about that storyline itself. I thought that the way that this is nitpicking and everything, but I felt like the way that it ended with his wife and daughter being killed, something about the way that it was shot, like when the arrow hits his daughter, I was like, I couldn't really tell. I don't know if this is the way that it was shot or the way it was edited or a mixture of both, but it was like, apparently the arrow went through and killed his wife too.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get that either. I was like, oh, his daughter died. That sucks. And then it cuts to a few scenes later. I'm like, oh, his wife died too? Really?
Right.
Was that guy really really like hauling back on that arrow that it had enough force to go through two people.
Right.
Does that happen? I mean, I don't think arrows really do that unless you're like really cranking on it.
Granted, one of those people were like a mini person. So.
A mini person, yeah.
Yeah.
A little person. You know, to that whole storyline, I actually really liked that because up to this point, all we've seen of Magneto is either just pure rage and like, you know, I don't necessarily want to say evil because I don't know if he's an evil guy, but he does a lot of bad stuff. It's either the bad stuff, the darkness, or it's the struggle between those two things. But this, he was like a sitcom dad.
Right.
You know, it's like totally different than any other time we've seen Magneto. He's just trying to really walk the line and be a good person and just exist as a normal member of society. And it was just interesting to see his character like that.
That was interesting, and I didn't have any real qualms with it. I felt like that whole arc, that whole storyline, I feel like that it made me think like, okay, I would see a Magneto movie. But here in Apocalypse, it just contrasted with the hollowness of the villain character and the motivations of the villain. It just felt like it was a wasted opportunity to do something worthwhile with the character.
Yeah.
And I think that his turn at the end, like his turn that he, you know, decided that he was going to help the X-Men with a really, really cheesy putting two beams down in front of Apocalypse in the shape of an X.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, guys, let's not. Please.
I didn't mind that so much.
Yeah, I kind of rolled my eyes a little.
It's
I didn't hate it.
It's cheesy.
It's cheesy, and I didn't hate it, but I was like, okay, Singer, okay. But I felt like his turn to basically help save everything. I was like, I felt like that was just unearned.
Yeah.
I wish that, and this goes back to Quicksilver, his arc not being fulfilling. I kind of wish that, you know, when he and Mystique were doing the worst that they could to convince Magneto to turn to the good side, I wish that there would have been a heartfelt moment between him and Quicksilver, and that could have been what caused him to you know, save everyone or whatever.
It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, because without that, it just seems like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and I'll be good right now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just intrinsically who Magneto is as a character.
Yeah.
But it just felt like completely unearned in this movie and in this story for me.
Right. And I think that kind of that drop, if you will, kind of hints at the timeliness of this movie coupled with Days of Future Past, because Days of Future Past felt so conclusive. Like that felt like the third movie in a trilogy. Like that should have been the last movie. Those storylines should have culminated the way they did with that movie. But we had all the rest of this stuff to address with Apocalypse, and I mean there was some conclusiveness in there, but it's like they left a lot of stuff open too. Like, why would you not have Quicksilver open up to his biological father?
Right.
Like, what are you saving that for? This is so clearly like this is the third movie. This has to be the end. Like, don't save that for something else. It's, I don't know. I just didn't. I feel like they were pulling their punches in that respect, and I think part of it is the fact that they kind of shot their wad with Days of Future Past.
Right.
Like I said, it was just so conclusive.
You're definitely right with that.
Okay.
Like it felt so conclusive to both timelines of the franchise. Like it felt like such a conclusive thing. And yeah, I agree.
Apocalypse should have been the second movie.
Right.
In the next franchise, not the third. Which is
or
unfortunate.
not done at all.
Or not done at all. Yeah.
Not that I thought that it was terrible. I just thought that it was really kind of just dull.
It had the feeling of the second entry in a franchise money grab kind of thing.
Yeah.
It kind of had that feel to it.
So yeah, okay, Jean Grey. Okay. How did you feel about Professor X and Apocalypse, you know, doing their mind thing, and, you know, Xavier fights him in his mind?
It was just a little too, I don't know. It was just too dreamy and like
too Christopher Nolan-y.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think Christopher Nolan would have done a better job with that.
Oh, I agree.
But I don't know. It just didn't. It felt like it was a bit of a distraction from what was going on in the real world, and it was just like, I mean, I understand that there's so much to hold you back with that. It's hard to represent something happening in someone's mind, like a vision in someone's mind. That's hard to represent. That's hard to do, and so I would have just rather had them leave it out than kind of fumble it like they did. I don't know. It just had the weird line of like, "Oh, you're in my house now," and
oh yeah, that was so.
Yeah, it's like you should have made a bigger house.
That made me cringe so much.
I didn't cringe at anything, which maybe if I saw it in a different perspective, I would have. But it felt campy and just not. It didn't work, and I don't know.
I think that between like that line and with Xavier's weird comic relief about Moira, I think that the Professor Xavier we've known throughout the entire franchise, both timelines, he's this distinguished kind of leader person, and we saw some of him being like a playboy in First Class, which I thought that was beautifully well done and really cool. But like here, it just felt like he should be transitioning more into that, you know, and he did transition more into like the leadership role and the kind of guiding force of the X-Men. But it's just like, you know, I can't really see Patrick Stewart saying, "You're in my house now."
Yeah, I can't either.
Yeah.
He's a classy, dignified gentleman. Not to say that James McAvoy isn't, but
right.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and seeing so I didn't have a problem with the actual like metaphysical kind of thing, like the mental showing them duking it out, because I've always thought like, okay, well, what? I mean, you know, Professor X can, you know, read minds, control minds, stuff like that, but he's if you're on a battlefield, I'm like, you know, he's almost a pacifist. He doesn't, I don't really see him doing much in a combat thing. To see him actually like fighting a villain was kind of cool. Yeah, to me,
that's true.
However, watching freaking Jean Grey stare at him while he's like laying there, like slipping into like death, basically saying like, "Jean, help," or whatever. I'm like, all right, Jean, you know that you can't control your powers. He's signaling to you to go in there. Like from the start, I was like, okay, yeah, Jean's gonna go in there. She's gonna go all crazy. She's gonna defeat Apocalypse for him in his mind. And then it cut back to her, and she just has this blank look on her face, like, do I go in? What do I do? What do you want me to do? I was just like, come on, just get with it. Just hurry up. And part of that was just also I was ready to get out of the theater because I was kind of bored.
Well, and that kind of leads to the actual climax of the conflict. Did you find it weird that like Jean Grey she should have been the linchpin of that that conflict and been the ultimate weapon to defeat Apocalypse, and she was in the movie, but she just like kind of walked out and just like exploded, sort of, and it's like
she did her Dark Phoenix thing.
Okay, see, I didn't realize that was a
that's
thing.
Right. You haven't revisited the franchise that much.
No,
like it's kind of funny to me because it's kind of like Bryan Singer has a hard on for this storyline because Jean Grey, from what I understand from the comics, I mean it's I have a very passing understanding of it, but basically, if you remember in X2, she sacrifices herself. And then she is basically, this is when she's having trouble controlling her powers, or she's seeing that she's becoming more powerful. Her arc in the comics is that she becomes this kind of all-powerful being. I don't know about all-powerful, but I'm probably butchering this. Thousands of, you know, comic book fans are screaming at their headphones. But but so like she has this ability where she becomes this Dark Phoenix, and she's reborn into this just, you know, powerful thing. And that was the big stumbling point for The Last Stand, is that in X3 is that X2 ended with her dying and then hinting that she was going to come back as the Phoenix, and then of course then Bryan Singer left X3, and then Brett Ratner was brought on at the last minute, and he had to scramble to do a bunch of stuff, and he's not a very talented director anyway.
No.
So he had to put all this together, and he had this monumental storyline to handle too. What I don't understand is Bryan Singer, man, second movie of that he's done in an X-Men timeline, or like he did the first two X-Men, ended with the Dark Phoenix. He's done the second and third X-Men movie of this little like trilogy. Still Jean Grey and the Dark Phoenix. Like, let her be Jean Grey.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, it just felt like, okay. But it makes sense within the confines of the story, and with the context of the story, is that Apocalypse is this incredibly powerful mutant. Of course, an equally, or like in a radically powerful mutant like Jean Grey, unleashing her full potential would destroy him, and that's fine. Okay. But yeah, so I don't know.
I was thinking it was strange that she didn't defeat him on a mental level as opposed to a physical one, because she just kind of explodes, and I was like, this is weird. Why isn't she just like going into his mind and just absolutely destroying him mentally, and then that degrades his physical capabilities? So that kind of stuck out to me, but I guess I didn't know that backstory. Okay, so I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, and that would have been cool to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a couple things to wrap up. One is the end scene with them in Cerebro that's been kind of refitted. I think it was in the Cerebro room. Kind of refitted as their, like, whatever it is in the comics and the cartoon and everything.
Their training room.
Their training room. If I remember correctly, it was Mystique leading them there. Your X-Men.
Yeah. That was some clunky dialogue.
It was clunky, and it's this monumental moment. She's brought together all these people. I mean, man, why did it have to be Mystique? I feel like that would have had more. That would have made the rest of the movie make more sense if Cyclops' arc was to put them all together, or like he became the Cyclops that he's supposed to be, the kind of leader of the X-Men, and he was the one giving that speech. Now, granted, he didn't have the development. He still didn't have his powers under control and everything, but I feel like if they would have struck out, no pun intended, struck out the Stryker storyline and had more time to develop Apocalypse and to kind of groom Cyclops' character into taking on that role of leading the X-Men, that would have been more satisfying to me than what we got. What we got was Jennifer Lawrence is a celebrity. Jennifer Lawrence is very popular. Let's put her in this leadership role. Mm-hmm. And people love Wolverine. Let's throw in a Wolverine cameo, and then
call it a day.
Yeah. It felt like such a missed opportunity, and it bothered me. That bothered me.
I agree. That was weird.
Yeah. Did you have any more thoughts on that, or should?
I mean, I liked the robots marching out, because it just reminded me of the animated series, that's really my connection to X-Men, not the comics. So
yeah, me too.
That from a nostalgia standpoint, I like that.
Sure, I can agree with that. The Sentinels.
Yeah, the Sentinels.
Yeah. So my last thought in the spoiler section is: did you stay for the tag?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What'd you make of it? There's basically, what was it? They're at Weapon X. They get his DNA. They get Wolverine's DNA, and it says Essex Corp. And
that means nothing at all to me. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what that is. I was thinking that part of the reason why they put the whole Stryker Weapon X plot into the story is because they want to keep Stryker an active member of the franchise. I think it might, if it's done properly, it could be cool to see just a Stryker movie.
Oh,
where he does his thing, and we see it from a total antagonistic viewpoint or perspective. That could be kind of cool, but I don't know if the studio has the balls to do that. I don't know if they could get the right person to do it. It'd be tricky.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was a pretty substantial tag in that respect, that it's all about Weapon X.
Right.
That's kind of cool in my book, but I just have I literally could not know less about Essex Corp. I have no idea what that is.
I know next to nothing as well.
Okay.
From what I've heard through just discussions and stuff online and podcasts and everything, is that, from what I understand, Essex Corp is I don't remember the name. It's the place where a certain villain comes from.
Okay.
I don't remember what the villain's name is, but apparently it's a pretty big villain at least for Wolverine.
Okay.
And apparently Essex Corp and that villain are responsible for creating a clone of Wolverine in some iteration of the comics.
Huh.
In that it's a lady clone, apparently.
Interesting.
So, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's setting up the new Wolverine movie that's coming out. That's going to be Hugh Jackman's last Wolverine.
Right.
Last outing as Wolverine. So, I don't know. But it did nothing for me because that whole plot line just felt completely tacked in and disconnected for me. So, I don't know.
Right.
Okay, so, yeah, that does it for our review of X-Men Apocalypse.
Yep.
Yay! We're running a little long this week, and I have to sleep for my actual real job, so we'll just briefly run through Potpourri.
Yeah.
I'll go first because I don't have much to say about this because I've only watched a couple episodes, but before you came over, Tiny, I watched a couple episodes of Veep.
Okay.
The HBO series with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. It's been running for like 4 or 5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think it won some Emmys this year.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a comedy, and from what I can tell from the first 2 episodes, it's worth the acclaim. It's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
That first episode is really strong. It's really good, and I liken it to, it's like a single cam workplace sitcom version of The West Wing, only if it dealt with people in government that don't really have not much going on, but it's not as important as the stuff of The West Wing. And
the people are caricatures, not characters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's got Tony Hale, it's got Julia Louis-Dreyfus, it's got I can't remember her name.
Anna
Schlumsky. She's great in it.
She's very good.
Yeah. How much have you seen of it?
I watched like half the first season, and I just dropped it because I had other stuff going on. But
did you ever bring it up on the podcast?
Potentially.
Okay.
Like
I did
early
a search
podcast.
and I couldn't find. It's not in the titles of any of the episodes. So.
Okay. It could have been early, like first 20 episodes.
Oh wow.
Early. Yeah. I don't know.
Cool. Yeah, I like it, and I'll watch more of it and probably report back in a future episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, Tiny, what do you got for Potpourri?
Well, I'm going to keep it in the Marvel universe. Is that right?
Yeah, Marvel. Let's see.
I couldn't even. That's bad.
Yeah, 20th Century Fox owns X-Men, and I want to say 20th Century Fox also owns Fantastic Four.
Gotcha.
Which, spoiling what you're going to talk about.
Yes, that's bad. I mean, that goes to show you right there how disrespected the franchise is. I couldn't even remember if it was DC or Marvel. Fantastic Four. I watched the most recent version of it. Josh Trank.
Josh Trank, yeah.
Josh Trank's iteration of it. It is bad. It is a bad movie. I didn't like it. I did not like it, but it wasn't quite as astoundingly awful as I had heard.
Oh, interesting.
It just reeked of overproduction.
Mm-hmm.
It just reeked of it, just in every single part. The first 10 minutes, the opening sequence, when some of the characters are younger, that was actually I was along for the ride. That I was like, all right, this isn't bad. I'm here. Let's do this. But the worst thing I can say for it is the entire movie felt like they were just sprinting through every single scene.
Yeah,
and I mean, it was just like there was zero attempt at chemistry amongst these characters. I mean, an actor like Michael B. Jordan and the white kid, Reed Richards.
Miles Teller.
Yeah. Those two should be bouncing off of each other like something bouncy.
And Kate Mara, too.
Kate Mara, yeah.
She's phenomenal.
Yes. I mean, they're so... Miles Teller is so hilarious and quick and witty, and Michael B. Jordan demonstrated his ability to do that as well in some of the other roles he's been in. Those two should be hilarious with each other. And
right.
We should be in love with those characters. But they're barely characters with what we got out of that movie. It was just astoundingly rushed. Nothing was developed. Not the characters, not the story, not the sets, not the music. Everything was just so bare bones. It was just like an incomplete film. I was just really shocked at how incomplete it was. That's the worst thing I can say. I don't know that the actors had anything to work with. Even the best actor in the world could not have improved that movie. It's just really a shame. It makes me want to go back and like look at interviews with Josh Trank about, because I know he kind of spoke out about how like he's like, I wanted to make a good movie, but he was just hamstrung by all these different things.
The night before the movie premiered,
right,
he tweeted about how it wasn't the movie that he wanted to make, and that he was forced into making a movie that he didn't want to make.
Right.
And it's just like when you have a director that's doing that on social media before opening weekend, it's just,
I mean, the movie industry is always a balance between art and business, and in this case, business ran the whole frickin' show. You can tell there's just so little of the movie was creative in its origin. It felt like the studio was like, let's make another Fantastic Four movie.
Right.
Let's sell some toys or something. It was so bad. I hope it doesn't ruin the careers of those involved, including Josh Trank. Because I liked some of his. He did I can't think of the movie. Chronicle. Thank you. Chronicle. That was a really cool movie, and I think he can do great things.
He was originally attached to do one of the Star Wars movies.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he could do it. I don't know if I've lost a little bit of faith in him, but I don't know. And I think we've lauded a lot of praise on the cast.
Yeah.
In other episodes for their other work, so I think they'll all be fine. But it's just unfortunate. I don't know hardly anything about Fantastic Four, the comics or anything, or the origin, but I'd like to see somebody make a damn good movie about it, because no one's done it yet.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
I think his original, or one of his goals in making the movie, was that he wanted to make some aspects of it, especially with like Reed Richards, kind of a body horror movie, like discovering the powers. One of the worst things, like in the entire movie, if any movie that I saw that year or years since, it was last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was last year. It felt so long ago. Yeah. So anyway, one of the worst moments that I've seen in a movie is the moment where they get their powers and then it says 1 year later.
Yeah, it was
and
really
it's like,
lazy.
Oh my God, guys.
Yeah.
And then just the entire climax of the movie when they put together the plan to take down Doom, and I felt like Reed Richards was literally about to say, okay guys, let's join together as a team, and let's take him down.
It was
so clunky and so awkward.
This is a juvenile dialogue. One of the few things I actually liked was actually the scene after what you're talking about, where it shows them basically like they're kind of like prisoners in this like facility, and they're like lab rats. I thought that was pretty eerie and like a little scary. They're like strapped down to tables and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of scary, like a little eerie, just like a very. It made me a little uneasy, but that only lasted for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it just started falling back off again, just terribleness. So
yep,
it's unfortunate.
Absolute terrible movie. I hated it.
I'd probably give it a 2.5.
Yeah,
out of 10.
I would say maybe 2 out of 10. Yeah, maybe 2.5 also. But if you want to see Michael B. Jordan and Miles Teller doing their cool, quippy, bantering back and forth and being charisma on screen, you can't go worse than that awkward moment. Just saying.
Yeah. Oh, I like that movie.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. That's what I was referencing.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they were great together in that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, Fantastic Four. Oof.
Not Tastic Four.
Nope.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Maybe they'll get it right on the 4th movie.
Yeah, I really hope that they do, because from my understanding, Fantastic Four is just an iconic team and iconic characters. And, I mean, it would be... I don't know how well they would fit in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I'm sure that they would find a way. If they could get the rights back, I think that would be really interesting.
I think Ben Grimm is a fascinating character from what I've seen, but no one's realized his fullest potential yet.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a great There was a great like meme online that was a picture from not really spoilers for Civil War or anything, but there was a picture from the scene in Civil War during the airport scene where what's his name, Cap and Spidey are talking, and like Cap says, "Hey, you got heart, kid. Where are you from?" And then he's like, "Queens," and he's like, "Brooklyn." The meme was replaced with, "You got heart, kid. Where are you from?" And then Spidey says Sony, and then Cap, played by Chris Evans, says 20th Century Fox or Fox or something. Yeah. I was like, that's clever.
That's
I like
awesome.
That. So yeah. So okay, well I think that about does it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer.
Yep.
And I want to thank everyone for listening. And also, I completely spaced that I told listeners last week, I'm awful. I'm so sorry, guys. I said that we would have some kind of contest for iTunes reviews. That's still going to happen. I think when I get paid, I'll go like pick up a DVD or something, or I'll do like a gift card situation. So,
yeah. Good call.
Yeah. So if you basically, I don't know what the rules are for this, but if you, how about this? Okay, here you go. Go ahead, if you haven't already, leave us a review on iTunes. When you do, message us on Facebook, and like the Facebook page, and we'll send you like a $10 gift card. I won't say that. We'll send one of those people a $10 gift card, chosen randomly. We'll put the end of it at like this month. Let's say June.
Okay.
You have between June 1st and June 30th. Like the page on Facebook. Write a review on iTunes. Let us know via message on Facebook. You'll be entered into the drawing. $10 gift card to Amazon will be sent your way potentially through the pool of submissions. So get on that. You have until the 30th, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome.
All right, so we'll see you guys next week. What are we doing next week?
What are we doing next week?
I have no idea.
Is it a topic episode?
I don't know, because we had plans because Mike was going to be back.
Oh yeah, we were going to do the
3-year anniversary one
thing,
early.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if Mike is back next week, we'll do a special 3-year anniversary podcast episode. If he's not, we might review a movie.
Something, yeah.
Either Pop Star or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. I don't know.
Something. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Obsessive Viewer, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more of our episodes at ovpodcast.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your preferred podcast app. The Obsessive Viewer's theme song is An Eclipse of Events and is provided by Loudlike from their EP Mistakes We Must Make. You can find that and more great music from them on iTunes, and like their Facebook page at facebook.com/loudlikemusic. Any and all feedback on the podcast is encouraged. You can email the hosts individually at Matt, Tiny, or Mike at ObsessiveViewer.com, or send an email to the podcast in general at podcast@ObsessiveViewer.com. Check out the Obsessive Viewer blog at ObsessiveViewer.com, where we post movie and TV reviews and the occasional editorial about the business of entertainment. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TheObsessiveViewer and follow us on Twitter at ObsessiveViewer, at ObsessiveTiny, and at IamMikeWhite. If you want more obsessive content in your life, check out our sister site, ObsessiveBookNerd.com, for book reviews, author spotlights, and a general celebration of reading. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com and subscribe to the podcast on the podcatcher of your choice. Again, thank you so much for listening. We love you. Be excellent to each other.